Thank you, Rabbi Eisenberg. Indeed special to be here. And it's a moment I agree. Did not really imagine I was going to actually share the special nachas. But having been here over Shabbos, having had a meal with Rabbi Feder, with Rabbi Eisenberg, Rabbi Light, seeing the other rabbis, I have to tell you, my wife and I are unbelievably inspired. Very, very moving. When you spend 27 years in one city, it's easy to sort of feel that that's where the action is. I come into Boca Raton and it's a little breathtaking. And my wife instantly asked a question to Rabbi Feder Friday night, and she asked, what is the entertainment for the evening? In Los Angeles, we have entertainment at our banquets. I'm actually thinking of bringing Rabbi Eisenberg out to be a fundraiser for us. He did a great job there. And Rabbi Feder looked at me and he said, "You're it." Well, the good news is I have 20 minutes. In Valley Torah, they only give me 8 at the banquet. I have 8 minutes to speak, and here they actually give me up to 20. So I have a little bit of leeway, and if I am the entertainment, I know you had Yaakov Shweki here this week. I'm not going to compete with him. So I'm not singing a song, that's for sure. But maybe I can tell you a joke. It's always a little dangerous to try a joke, but I'm going to try a joke because I think it leads a little bit into what I want to share with you. And the joke is about a guy, an elderly individual who comes home one night, sits down in his comfortable chair, doesn't say a word to his wife, and starts staring at the TV. He does it that night, again, the next day, the next day, the next day, and he doesn't move. He literally becomes like a vegetable staring at that TV, not interested in eating, not interested in talking to his wife. And his wife is getting worried. She says to the husband, this is not, you can't go on like this. You have to go to see a doctor. You have to see a doctor. He says, I'm not going to any doctor. You go to the doctor. You go to the doctor. She goes to the doctor. She says to the doctor, my husband, he's like a vegetable. He sits there like a couch potato. He watches the TV aimlessly. And what should I do? Doctor looks at her very sternly and he says, listen to me very carefully. This is what you need to do, or I know what your husband is suffering from. Otherwise, he's going to die. So listen to me. For the next month, you must serve him hand and foot. Anything he wants made, anything he wants baked, anything he wants cooked, whatever he needs, you have to do for him. You must literally become his slave for the next 30 days, or else he's going to die. She goes home, opens the door. Sure enough, he's sitting at the couch there, in the chair. He says, Nusa, what did the doctor say? She looks and she says, the doctor says you're going to die. That's a cute little joke, but the truth of the matter is I think it really reflects a lot about what we feel about life. We tend to sort of feel certain things are doable, certain things are not. I can't go beyond. I can't become a slave to my spouse, and therefore things are going to happen. I can't have a vision of trying to change the world because that's not who I am. And here at the JEC, with the rabbis that you have, and what this entire organization is about, is believing in the greatness of the Jewish soul. Believing that there are no limitations. There are no places we can't go as individuals and as people. To believe that with the power of Torah, as was stated before, the power of education, the power of sharing information, what that means in terms of changing a person's life. We really have no idea. I had the pleasure of hearing of Revda, great almost of the past generation, and he spoke. He came to Valley Torah High School. This was a man, literally a throwback, who happened to have the schools. He had the great merit of hearing shmuzim, great inspirational talks from the legendary Eliyahu Lapian. And he shared with us this thought that he had heard many, many years ago, decades ago. He said that Rabbi Lapian would give a shmooze, he would give a Musar talk, an inspirational talk about Jewish ethics, Jewish morals. And he quoted the great Reb Chaim Volozhin, a man who's legendary, lived about 200 years ago. And he would write about the fact that you had a couple in Berlin who was so excited about the birth of their first child. And he was going to the hospital, taking his wife for the delivery, and everything was going great. And 500 miles away, there was a yeshiva bacher, a young man who had committed about a month before, at a very, very inspirational moment of his life, that, you know what, I'm going to make another step in the right direction. And I commit that before I go to sleep every single night, I'm going to learn for 10 minutes. And it was going very, very nicely. And they're 500 miles away, two different scenes. You've got the husband going to the emergency room with his wife to give birth for his first child. You've got this yeshiva bacher who's coming home from a wedding, exhausted and tired. The wife goes into the emergency room and they're ready for the delivery. Everything seems to be wonderful. And all of a sudden the doctor comes out and he says, "We have some complications. I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Things are a little touch and go." And 500 miles away, that yeshiva bacher is exhausted. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And he's exhausted, he's tired, and he's ready to plats right into bed. And as his eyes are about to close, he's about to fall asleep. He remembered, I made a commitment that before I go to sleep, I'm going to learn for 10 minutes. And these two events are going on. This expecting father who was at the top of the world just a few minutes ago. And now he's hearing this devastating news that there are complications in the birth. And we're not sure who's going to make it and who's not going to make it. And 500 miles away, you've got this yeshiva bacher lying in bed, grappling with himself, deciding, should I get out of bed to learn for those 10 minutes, or should I just decide to just turn over and go to sleep? They seem to be unrelated. It says Reb Chaim Volozhin. The young man decides, you know what, I made a commitment. I'm going to learn for those 10 minutes. And he picks himself up out of that bed. He puts the light on. And he learns Torah for 10 minutes. The incredible impact travels. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me how it works, but we know God runs this world. And the power of Torah spreads. And 500 miles away, the doctor comes out. And he says, thank God, everything's good. It worked out. You're the proud father of a baby boy. And that man, that young boy, that young yeshiva bacher has no idea that his 10 minutes of extending himself, of going beyond himself, of doing what he thought he couldn't do, but he gave up. He sacrificed. That has that ripple effect. The spiritual quality of the Jewish people is such that we really won. And when a Jew in Boca told us something special, a Jew in Russia or Israel or California is impacted. We're all impacted. And we know that because we really won. We won people. And that's why we have to care, because what the right arm is doing is impacted by the left. The brain and the legs and the stomach, we're all in one body. We know that right now I've got this pinched nerve and the pain's coming from my back, but I feel it on my leg. It's amazing. We're one. And when we impact a Jew, not only are we changing that Jew's life, we're changing the eternity of the Jewish people. And Reb Chaim Volozhin goes on to say, after 120 years, when that young yeshiva bacher now meets his maker, after 120 years, he goes up and this is your life is played in front of him. And he looks through his wonderful life and the nachas that he had and the great commandments that he was able to fulfill. And all the wonderful things that he did are being shown on that beautiful screen. And he's getting nachas. Wow, look, yeah, I've done this, I've done that. And he's really feeling good. All of a sudden, some scenes of a family that are doing a lot of wonderful things are being projected on the screen there in the next world. And it's called the Olam Emes. It's called the world of truth. So the fellow says, God, I hate to interrupt. I know this is to my benefit, but I have to be honest here. That family, I don't recognize them. It's not my children. It's not my grandchildren. I mean, it's wonderful that you're putting it on my screen, but I don't really know what's going on here. I don't know why this is being shown. I don't know those people. And the heavenly court says, I know you don't. But you don't realize, at night, about 80, 90, or 100 years ago, when you pulled yourself out of bed that night, when you wanted to learn Torah for 10 minutes because you committed, you made a difference, yeah, you made a difference in that person's life. Your Torah spread to Berlin. Your Torah impacted Jews all over the world. And yeah, that's to your credit. That's on your calculation. And you're shutting the nachas now. In the world of truth, that's truth. That this is who you are. And this is what you've achieved. So we talk about the JEC. Truth of the matter is, yes, it's a Jewish education center, but it's also the Jewish Eternity Center. It's our way of really making a difference, not just for now, not just for one person's life. My wife and I are sitting at Rabbi Light's table, hearing the Havdalah service. He's playing the guitar, making a beautiful Havdalah, and he asked an innocent question to the collegiates there. How many people here have just kept the very first Shabbos? And I have to tell you, when I saw 6 hands go up, I started to tremble. So I was part of an experience of 6 incredible souls, wonderful, beautiful college kids who experienced Shabbos for the very first time, who went through a Shabbos and observed it, and understood it, and loved it for the very first time. Is that just a one-time deal? That's just a one-time event? Or is that a life-altering, potentially life-altering experience? We don't know the reverberations. We don't know the long-term impact. An investment in the JEC is an investment in eternity. We literally are changing the landscape of the Jewish people. One incredible soul at a time. And it makes a very, very big difference. If you think for a second that that's not the most important thing in the world, it's not true. The great Rabbeinu Bachai, one of the great rabbinic authorities of the last 1,000 years, writes in one of his classic works, Duties of the Heart. And he says you have 2 people. And one is a righteous individual, so exacting in every single detail of Jewish law, does nothing wrong. But he's into himself. He's sort of focused on his world. Doesn't reach out, doesn't look out to others. Doesn't bother him that the rest of the world is not aware of what Judaism is about. This incredible beauty of Torah is all about. And another person might not be perfect, might have some flaws, but extended themselves and cared and did whatever they could to bring that shine and the beauty of Judaism to other people's lives. Again, in the next world, that person might be pretty surprised. The person was so exacting, gets a little talk from God and says, it seemed like you cared, but where were you when other people were thirsting? Other people wanted an answer. There were questions. There were such beautiful questions yesterday from people who are not that exposed to Jewish ideals and Jewish values. People are thirsting out there, and you just care about yourself. It's wonderful that you kept all the mitzvahs, but what about the rest of the Jewish people? The other one cared. He says that one, the reward is going to be incomparable. That's what we're about here this evening. That's what we're celebrating. The people here, the supporters, the learners, the involved parties on so many different levels. What you're doing this evening in supporting this incredible organization is much more than we can ever imagine. We'll only have a glimpse after 120 years to understand the full impact. And I'll end with an incredible story of our sages. They tell us a story about one of the greatest rabbis of our history, a man named Yossi ben Yoezer, quoted in the very earliest part of the Ethics of Our Fathers. And Yossi ben Yoezer, being persecuted by the Greeks, was on his way to be executed. And he had an upstart nephew called Yekum Ish Tzoraros. Yekum Ish Tzoraros was a collaborator. And he went with the Greeks and he did what he wanted, and he was riding his chariot with his beautiful Greek clothing on the Sabbath, and he happens to meet up as his uncle Yossi ben Yoezer, the great rabbi, is on his way to get executed. And he says, nice clothing. Aren't you proud of me, Uncle Yossi? See, I got some nice threads here, these nice Greek threads. And Uncle Yossi says to his nephew, look, this is the reward that you are getting. And you didn't fulfill anything about Judaism. Can you imagine the reward that I'm going to get? And I gave my life for the Jewish people. And Yossi ben Yoezer, Yekum Ish Tzoraros looks at Yossi ben Yoezer and he says, Uncle Yossi, what are you talking about? Look at you. You are going to your death. You're about to get executed. You talk to me about reward? To which he looked back at his nephew and he says, well, this is the punishment that I'm getting. And I fulfilled the word of God. I cared about the Jewish people. Think about yourself. And you don't care about the Jewish people. And those words entered his nephew. And in that brief, instantaneous moment of illumination, Yekum Ish Tzoraros realized, what have I done? What am I saying? How can I talk to my uncle this way? And he threw his threads down, he threw his clothing down, he ran off between two mountains, and he cried. And incredibly, in his repentance, he literally left this world and went up to the heavens. And the Talmud relates a story from the point of view of a person being able to change his life in a matter of moments. It's a wonderful story to remind us, no matter what a person has done in their life, they can be so indignant and so intolerant and so negative that they can turn around in a matter of a second. There's another dimension to the story. Yossi ben Yoezer certainly had better things to do in the last 5 minutes of his life, didn't he? Didn't Yossi ben Yoezer, couldn't he have said to his nephew, Yekum, do me a favor. I got 5 minutes left to live. Can you hassle me a little bit later? What are you doing? Why are you bothering me? Please take a walk. I want to meditate in my last 5 minutes. I want to say Shema Yisrael. I want to do something significant. I want to learn something deep. I want to do the most significant thing I could possibly do before I meet my Maker. Apparently there was nothing more significant. Apparently the most important thing he could have done was talk to his nephew to try to help him realize the truth of this world. Because there's nothing more significant. In the last 5 minutes of a person's life, if you ask yourself, if you have 5 minutes left to live, what can you do to elevate yourself to the maximum ability that you have in those 5 minutes? The answer is from this Talmud. You touch another Jew. You inspire somebody else. You do what you can to make a difference in a person's life. That's what the JEC is about. And with the leadership, you're very, very blessed. My wife and I going back on a flight tomorrow to Los Angeles. You have the good fortune of having incredible rabbis. Rabbi Feder's an incredible dynamo. Just spending one meal with him, it just sort of his exuberance is incredible. Rabbi Eisenberg, Rabbi Light, the rest of the rabbis, they're incredible people. So much to learn. Every minute that you spend hearing a shiur, hearing some Torah, hearing a lesson, the 300 people that are touched, it could be 500, it could be 800. If we continue to build the JEC, there's really no limit. Not just in numbers, not just in the quantity of individuals, but also in equality. Let us, Bezrat Hashem, with the help of God, let's continue to build this incredible organization. Let's support the amazing work of the rabbis and their wives in their selfless dedication to grow Torah in this incredible community. And the merit of all of you, the merit of all of us, building Torah, reaching out, being part of a community that cares about other Jews. Let's, Bez Hashem, look forward to the ultimate celebration when the end of all this difficult, long exile ends, suffering that the Jewish people see on a regular basis ends, Bezrat Hashem, and we merit the coming of the Messiah, the pay we made. Amen.
Amen.